Imagine settling into your cushy plane seat, anticipating a peaceful flight, only for an arrogant stranger to unleash fury on an innocent child. Now picture that child being black, their cries sparking a tirade of prejudice that shakes an entire cabin. This is the moment that sets the stage for an unforgettable journey, where appearances deceive, power hides in plain sight, and a single ugly complaint changes lives forever. Today, you'll witness a high-stakes confrontation in the skies, a drama thick with unexpected twists, one that ends with an explosive revelation about exactly who's on board this plane and who holds all the cards. Amina Jackson carefully cradled her 6-month-old daughter Maya as she stood on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. The sky stretched in a bright, endless blue above her. It was the kind of day that gave travelers hope: no looming storms, gentle breezes, and just enough crispness in the air to feel invigorating. She was about to board a state-of-the-art Gulfstream GC650, an executive jet typically reserved for the highest echelons of corporate America. Teterboro was abuzz with activity, ground crew in reflective vests, the mechanical whir of refueling trucks and private jets lined up like gleaming trophies for the wealthy. Amina's husband, Arthur Jackson, would normally accompany them, but last-minute negotiations in Manhattan forced him to meet them at their destination, Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. He insisted, however, that she and baby Maya still take the family jet. After all, Arthur was the CEO of Sky High Airlines, a major competitor to giants like Delta and American, and he had certain privileges that made traveling far simpler than it would be for most people. Amina's heart swelled with a mix of pride and responsibility. She knew how significant Arthur's position was, how many looked up to him as one of the few black CEOs in the aviation industry. This flight was more than just a personal convenience. It was a testament to the achievements of an entire community that rarely saw themselves in positions of power in corporate boardrooms. As Amina stepped onto the jet's red-carpeted steps, she felt an air of comfort and relief. Little did she know, however, that the flight would soon become anything but peaceful. Meanwhile, not too far behind, a woman clutched an embossed ticket, peering at the glimmering private jet with curiosity and excitement. Her name was Cassandra Wheeler, a mid-level marketing executive from a rival airline who had managed an unexpected invitation onto this very exclusive flight. She'd received an email stating that she could hitch a ride on a corporate courtesy flight from Teterboro to Atlanta, courtesy of Sky High Airlines' top brass. Cassandra, pressed for time due to a critical job interview in Atlanta, jumped at the opportunity, not realizing exactly whose flight she'd be sharing. Cassandra believed that she was being given special corporate treatment because of her considerable experience in airline marketing. She'd worked a decade in the travel industry, developing a keen eye for promotional campaigns and brand expansions. If anyone was going to climb the ladder quickly, she believed it was her. Though flattered, Cassandra also felt a tinge of cynicism. Why had Sky High extended this olive branch to a competitor's employee? She reasoned that maybe it was standard procedure, some sort of inter-airline courtesy, or a PR move. Her curiosity grew as she gazed at the plush interior upon entering the aircraft. Her seat was not far from where Amina held Maya. Cassandra flashed a polite smile, the kind you give strangers on a plane before promptly sinking into the leather seat. She was more absorbed by her phone notifications than the mother and child a few feet away. Amina, for her part, noticed but didn't dwell on it. She was preoccupied with Maya, who was growing restless from being strapped in her arms. The baby's small whimpers echoed in the spacious cabin, lined with top-tier amenities, recliner seats, polished wooden paneling, and high-definition screens for entertainment. Cassandra placed noise-canceling headphones around her neck, hoping to drown out any potential disruptions during the flight. She had no inkling at that moment just how ironic her choice would become, or how central that mother and baby would soon be to her entire life's trajectory. Shortly after takeoff, Maya grew fussy. The change in air pressure made her ears pop, and she started to cry in discomfort. Like any good mother, Amina tried the usual remedies, feeding gently, massaging her ears, and speaking soothing words to calm her down. For a moment, Maya's cries decreased to muffled whimpers, but then she burst into tears again, this time more insistently. Cassandra, busy reviewing notes on her tablet for her interview, threw a concerned glance at the mother and child. She took a deep breath and smiled tightly, trying to maintain composure. She found babies adorable in small doses, but she wasn't the most patient person around children. This, however, was a private jet, a refined environment, or so Cassandra thought, and she didn't expect to be stuck next to a crying child in such a setting. Amina, accustomed to traveling with Maya, recognized the stress on her fellow passenger's face. She politely apologized. "I'm so sorry." She's usually a calm baby, but the altitude changes are bothering her ears. Cassandra forced a thin-lipped smile. "It's okay, babies cry. I'm sure she'll settle down," she said, her tone neutral but somewhat clipped. She plugged her headphones into her phone, flicking through noise cancellation settings. For a while, that was that. Maya quieted down after Amina managed to nurse her. The flight attendant, wearing a crisp uniform with the Sky High Airlines logo, offered to bring hot water for formula and an extra pillow. Amina felt grateful for the assistance. She took a moment to relax, glancing out at the cottony clouds outside the window. Cassandra, noticing the airline logo on the attendant's lapel, decided to fish for information. She waited until the attendant returned to check on them. "Excuse me," Cassandra said, in her best professional tone. "I was told this was a corporate courtesy flight." "Who arranged it exactly?" The attendant, a neatly composed woman named Karen Park, smiled politely. "I'm not entirely sure about the administrative details, but I do know we often accommodate professionals traveling for business purposes when seats are available, especially if they're affiliated with our industry partners." Cassandra nodded thoughtfully. "Interesting. Well, thanks. I appreciate the help." Karen gave a small bow and excused herself. Cassandra's curiosity only deepened. Did the CEO of Sky High personally sign off on her traveling on his family's plane? Was this normal procedure, or was there something else at play? She glanced at her watch, thinking about the interview that was awaiting her in Atlanta. The potential new role offered a significant pay raise and more responsibilities. She had always harbored the ambition to break away from her current company and land a senior position somewhere she could have greater influence. Sky High was rumored to be looking for an external consultant to lead a new branding initiative. Could that be why they had extended the courtesy flight to her? Or maybe she was overthinking it. She shrugged and went back to her notes, occasionally glaring at Amina and Maya whenever the baby made a noise. Just when Amina thought Maya would remain calm, the baby began fussing again, this time louder. Cassandra sighed audibly, letting her frustration slip. She tapped her foot on the plush carpeting, eyes darting between her watch and the mother's attempts to soothe the child. "Sorry," Amina apologized again, her cheeks reddening. She hated drawing attention to herself, especially for something she couldn't control. She'd been on countless flights with Arthur, but it was never easy when Maya had ear pressure pains. At least on a typical commercial flight, the hum of the engines and the presence of other passengers overshadowed a baby's cries. But here, in a confined, and luxurious cabin. Every coo or cry seemed magnified. Cassandra tried to feign politeness for a few more minutes, but impatience gnawed at her. Her big interview was in a matter of hours, and the last thing she needed was a pounding headache from a screaming infant. She considered requesting the flight attendant to move her seat, but this was a private jet. There weren't exactly rows of seats to choose from, just a small cluster of plush chairs. Across the aisle, an older gentleman named Robert Pike, who was also traveling on a corporate pass, gave Cassandra a sympathetic nod. He was a retired pilot consultant working with one of Sky High's subsidiaries. He understood babies were part of the travel experience, but he also recognized the tension in Cassandra's eyes. He leaned over gently. Try popping in some earbuds or earplugs. Or if you have gum or candy that might help distract you from the crying, he suggested kindly. Cassandra offered a half-smile, rummaging through her bag. She found a pack of gum, unwrapped a piece, and chewed with deliberate force. The rhythmic motion provided little comfort, but it was something. Meanwhile, Karen, the flight attendant, approached, offering small courtesy kits with eye masks and earplugs, standard fare, but certainly helpful. Cassandra took them with a clipped word of thanks. Amina, seeing the tension, apologized again, but Cassandra's frustration had begun to eclipse her courtesy. She's crying so loud, she muttered under her breath, though just loud enough for Amina to hear. Amina bit her lip, trying to maintain composure. She didn't want to snap back. That wasn't in her nature. She had encountered subtle prejudice in her life, the kind that hid behind polite smiles and veiled comments. Whether this was about race or just a baby's noise was uncertain, but the tension was there, thick enough to taste in the air. Maya's cries escalated again about an hour into the flight. Turbulence jostled the plane, slightly possibly frightening the baby. Amina stood up carefully, holding Maya against her shoulder, pacing the aisle to calm her child. It was a tactic many parents used, gentle rocking and movement. It worked for a moment, until a sudden dip in the plane's altitude spurred Maya's cries even louder. Cassandra glared openly now. She tore off her headphones, tossed them into her seat, and let out an exasperated huff. This is unbearable. Someone has to do something about that baby. Amina heard it clearly. She pivoted to face Cassandra. I'm doing the best I can, ma'am. She's a baby. She can't help it. But Cassandra was already on her feet, stepping into the aisle. Look, I have an important meeting in Atlanta. I can't afford to arrive drained from this constant shrieking. Robert Pike tried to intervene diplomatically. It's just a baby. These things happen. Cassandra brushed him off. I understand babies cry, but on a private jet, I expected more consideration. If you can't keep your child quiet, maybe you shouldn't be traveling, she said, her tone turning acidic. She paused, eyes flicking over Maya's dark curls, her cherubic face glistening with tears. Then, under her breath, she muttered a phrase that would pierce the cabin's tension like a bullet. This loud black baby is driving me insane. The words hung in the air, echoing as though she had shouted them through a megaphone. Amina's eyes widened. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the entire cabin must hear it. Robert's jaw dropped, and even the flight attendant froze, stunned that anyone would let such overt prejudice slip from their lips in this day and age. Amina felt her cheeks burn. She pressed Maya closer, as if to shield her from the toxicity. Excuse me, she managed to say. What did you just say? Cassandra, realizing the weight of her words, backpedaled. I mean the baby is loud, that's all. I didn't mean anything by it, Amina echoed incredulously, tears threatening to well in her eyes. Not from sadness alone, but from anger. You specifically said, black baby. Why is her being black relevant to her crying? Cassandra sputtered. I was just describing, that was a racist statement. Robert said, his voice firm. The flight attendant nodded in silent agreement. Karen, the attendant, hurried to defuse the situation, but the damage was done. A hush fell over the cabin, broken only by Maya's soft whimpers. Cassandra flushed with embarrassment, a swirl of shame and indignation rising up. She thought, this is just a misunderstanding, right? But even as she tried to rationalize it, she knew it was more than that. She had singled out Maya's race in a derogatory context, and there was no talking her way out of the cruelty. Amina's voice trembled when she spoke again. My daughter's race has nothing to do with her crying. She's a baby. All babies cry. Cassandra crossed her arms. Well, it's not fair to everyone else. I paid for this flight. Robert scoffed. Paid for it? This is a courtesy flight. It's not your private property. Cassandra's temper flared. She jabbed a finger toward the mother and child. And it's not some daycare center either. Listen, I'm sorry if I offended you, but I can't have my entire flight ruined by a screaming kid. Amina turned to Karen. Are we able to land soon? I can't stand being near this woman. Karen sighed, trying to maintain a calm, professional tone. Ma'am, we're in mid-flight. We still have at least an hour and a half before we land in Atlanta. Please try to return to your seats. The turbulence could get worse. Amina glanced at the seatbelt sign, which had just turned on. She cringed. The last thing she needed was more unpredictability in the air. Gently, she settled back into her seat, holding Maya close. Her heart pounded. She wanted to cry, wanted to scream, but she had to remain composed for Maya. Cassandra returned to her seat as well, fists clenched. She put her headphones on again, but she could feel the judgmental stares from Robert the attendant, and probably everyone else. She shifted uncomfortably, her anger warring with guilt. For the next 20 minutes, the cabin felt ice cold. The pilot announced a belt of turbulence, instructing everyone to remain seated. Occasionally, Karen or another attendant would walk by, checking seatbelts and whispering gentle reassurances. The hush between Cassandra and Amina was deafening, fueling an atmosphere thick with resentment. When the turbulence finally subsided, Robert unbuckled and approached Amina, ignoring Cassandra. I'm really sorry you had to deal with that. Some people just... He trailed off, shaking his head. If it helps, I can speak to the pilot or the flight attendant about possibly relocating Ms. Wheeler to the back of the cabin. Amina managed a small, thankful smile. Thank you, but it's all right. It won't change her attitude. I just want to get to Atlanta. Karen overheard and joined them. Mrs. Jackson, if there's anything we can do, it's fine, Amina whispered. I appreciate your kindness. She didn't mention that the Jackson in her name was the Jackson who owned this jet. She had no desire to throw her husband's power around, nor did she want to risk an even bigger scene. She figured she'd tell Arthur what happened later. Perhaps he'd address it in a discreet, professional manner. Right now, though, her priority was Maya's well-being. As the plane smoothed out its course, Cassandra decided to visit the lavatory to compose herself. She needed a moment away from everyone's eyes. In the mirror, she studied her reflection cheeks, burning from her earlier outburst. Why did she say it like that? She didn't consider herself racist. Maybe she was just describing the baby. But deep down, Cassandra knew it was more she had allowed a vile sliver of her own prejudice to show. The stress of her upcoming interview and the baby's crying had stripped away her veneer of politeness. Her phone buzzed. It was an email reminding her to confirm her appointment with the recruitment panel at Jackson Aviation Consulting, a subsidiary of Sky High Airlines, which specialized in strategic branding. Cassandra felt a jolt of excitement tinged with trepidation. This was the reason she was on this flight, the reason she had to maintain composure. She couldn't let a meltdown ruin her shot at a life-changing career move. But how was she going to face potential future colleagues or even her prospective boss, knowing she just exposed this ugly side of herself to a random mother on a plane? She shook her head, tried to breathe, and told herself to keep calm for the rest of the journey. 40 minutes before landing, the pilot's voice crackled through the cabin's speakers. "We are beginning our descent into Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Local time is 2:45 p.m. Weather is partly cloudy, around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Please remain seated and buckle up when the seatbelt sign turns on." Amina exhaled, relieved that they'd be on the ground soon. She'd texted Arthur, letting him know about the incident in vague terms. He replied that he'd meet them immediately upon landing and to stay calm. Cassandra closed her tablet, tidying her belongings. She planned to disembark quickly and head straight to her interview. She wanted to forget this awkward flight. However, fate had other ideas. As they touched down, the luxury jet taxied to a private hangar reserved for Sky High's VIP flyers. The seatbelt sign turned off, and the pilot stepped out of the cockpit to greet them. He was accompanied by two ground staff members in suits. Karen made the announcement, "Please remain seated for a moment. Mr. Jackson is on his way to receive his family and greet our passengers." Cassandra perked up at the mention of Mr. Jackson. She knew that was the name of the CEO, Arthur Jackson. A flurry of excitement collided with the dread in her stomach. What if she got a chance to shake his hand, make a quick impression? That could seal the deal for her job prospects. She quickly refreshed her lipstick, combed a hand through her hair, and practiced a polite smile. Amina braced herself, holding Maya. She knew Arthur was protective and would be furious when he learned what had happened. She just hoped he wouldn't make a public spectacle. The cabin door opened, revealing Arthur Jackson, tall, elegantly dressed in a tailored suit, with the calm, commanding presence of a man who had navigated far more daunting negotiations than a short flight. His gaze immediately settled on Amina and Maya. His expression softened into a radiant smile, though concern flickered in his eyes as he guessed something was amiss. "Hey, sweetheart," he greeted, leaning to kiss Amina's forehead and then gently caressing Maya's curls. "Was the flight okay?" Amina nodded, but her eyes betrayed her tension. Arthur noticed, but he turned to address the rest of the passengers. "Thank you all for flying with us. I'm Arthur Jackson, CEO of Sky High Airlines. I trust you had a smooth trip." Cassandra felt her pulse spike. This was her chance. She stood, stepping forward to greet him. "Mr. Jackson, what an honor. I'm Cassandra Wheeler. I'm actually in town for an interview with your company's branding team." Arthur extended a handshake politely. "Nice to meet you." He turned to Robert, shaking his hand too, and then briefly to the flight attendant. Finally, his attention returned to Cassandra, eyes narrowing slightly. "You have an interview with the branding team." Cassandra brightened, oblivious to the undertones. "Yes, indeed. I specialize in marketing strategies. I'm thrilled about the opportunity and, well, I appreciate the courtesy flight." Arthur nodded, no smile on his face now. Something cold and calculating passed behind his eyes. He glanced at Amina again, who lowered her gaze. "I see. I hope everything went smoothly," he said, his voice a curious mixture of politeness and tension. Cassandra's stomach swirled with unease, but she pressed on. "Yes. Well, I mean, we had a little hiccup with the babies crying, but—" She paused, noticing the steel in Arthur's gaze. Arthur's voice was calm, but his words sliced through the air. "A little hiccup. Is that what you'd call it?" He looked at the flight attendant. "Karen, could you please confirm if there was any disturbance during the flight Karen nodded gravely. Yes, Mr. Jackson, there was. Ms. Wheeler made a remark about your daughter Cassandra's face went ashen. She lifted her palms, trying to appear innocent. I was just frustrated. It wasn't personal. I didn't even know it was your daughter. Arthur's eyebrows lifted. You didn't know it was my daughter, so that made it acceptable to refer to an infant in a racist manner. Cassandra stammered. I didn't mean it like that. It's just the baby was crying, and I… Before she could finish, Arthur raised a hand, signaling her to stop. Let's speak outside. He looked around at the other passengers, calm but resolute. Robert, Ms. Park, thank you for your assistance. Mrs. Jackson and I will handle this. A short walk down the steps brought them onto the tarmac, the asphalt reflecting the Georgia heat. Arthur led Cassandra to a quiet corner while Amina and Maya stood a short distance away, flanked by flight staff. Arthur turned his eyes cold and clear. Ms. Wheeler, you have an interview with my company in approximately 1 hour, is that correct? Yes, sir, she whispered, trying to keep her composure. It's with your branding department. I was told it might be a preliminary interview for a senior role. This is a huge opportunity for me. Arthur nodded, crossing his arms. Tell me, Ms. Wheeler, if my wife and child had not been on board today, would you feel any guilt for what you said? Cassandra swallowed hard, then tried to explain. I was stressed, Mr. Jackson. The baby was crying. I just lost my temper. I know it sounded bad, but I'm not a racist. I have friends who are… Stop, Arthur said, his voice firm. I don't need you to parade your list of black friends or colleagues to prove anything. I'm interested in your immediate reaction. You singled out my daughter's race in a derogatory statement. That baby, Ms. Wheeler, is the daughter of a black CEO, a symbol to many in our community that we can lead companies and shape industries. Your comment was unacceptable in any context. Cassandra's eyes flooded with tears. She was losing control of the situation. Please, Mr. Jackson, I'm begging you. I need this job. I'm good at what I do, and I promise you my remark doesn't define who I am. Arthur studied her, a swirl of thoughts flickering in his mind. He had the power to cancel her interview with a single phone call. She would never make it past the front desk. He had half a mind to do just that. Yet Arthur was also a firm believer in teaching lessons, constructive ones, if possible. He took a breath. Do you understand the gravity of what you've done? Cassandra nodded fervently, tears streaming. Yes, sir, I do. I'll do anything to fix this. Arthur paused. So you want to keep your interview slot? You want to have a chance at redemption, so to speak? She blinked, uncertain but hopeful. Yes, I do. Please give me a chance. Arthur glanced back at Amina, who stood near the plane's stairs, gently rocking Maya. Amina's eyes met his, and she shook her head, communicating her distrust. Arthur understood her well. He too felt that immediate retribution was warranted. But perhaps the best form of retribution was not quick punishment, but forcing Cassandra to confront what she had done in a more meaningful, transformative way. He turned back to Cassandra. Go to the interview. My staff will still conduct it, but you'll need to wait for the final decision. Cassandra almost collapsed with relief. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I promise I'll do better. You won't regret giving me a second chance. Arthur nodded curtly, not an ounce of warmth in his expression. Don't thank me yet. Consider this a stay of judgment, not a pardon. With that, he stepped away, heading back to his wife. Cassandra watched him go, her heart pounding, as the Atlanta heat pressed in on her. She had a second chance, but would it even matter? The pit in her stomach warned her that the worst might be yet to come. Cassandra arrived at the skyscraper in downtown Atlanta that housed Sky High's subsidiary Jackson Aviation Consulting. Sweat beaded on her forehead, partly from the scorching sun, partly from nerves. She checked in with the receptionist who guided her to a plush waiting lounge on the 31st floor. Her mind reeled with everything that had happened in the last few hours. She tried to steady her nerves, telling herself that she'd done great work in marketing for a decade. She had a solid portfolio, glowing references, and a strategic vision. That had to count for something. Perhaps if the interview panel saw her capabilities, they might overlook one regrettable outburst. She was soon escorted into a sleek conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a panoramic view of Atlanta's skyline. Inside, a panel of 4 executives awaited her. She recognized 2 of them from LinkedIn profiles she'd studied in preparation. Ruth Sanchez, head of branding, smiled politely. "Ms. Wheeler, thank you for coming. We've reviewed your resume and your marketing campaigns at your previous company. Impressive work." Cassandra's confidence flickered. "Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity." Beside Ruth sat Devon Brooks, a senior strategist, and across from him was Leslie Chen, a communications guru who had orchestrated high-profile campaigns for Fortune 500 clients. At the end of the table sat an empty chair, presumably for Arthur Jackson or another executive. However, Arthur didn't appear. The interview began with the standard pleasantries. "Tell us about your background. What do you see as our brand's main challenges? How would you handle rebranding in a competitive market?" Cassandra launched into her well-rehearsed pitches, referencing data campaigns and strategic frameworks. She felt a sense of relief she could do this. She was in her element. But halfway through, Devon paused and furrowed his brow. "Miss Wheeler, we just received a message from Mr. Jackson. He's on his way." Cassandra's throat went dry. Arthur was coming? Did that mean he was personally invested in this interview? She forced a smile. "Of course, I'm happy to wait." Within minutes, Arthur Jackson walked in, greeting the panel and nodding at Cassandra. He sat in the empty chair, face unreadable. "Please continue. I'd like to hear Ms. Wheeler's thoughts on brand positioning." Cassandra swallowed, launching into an analysis of Sky High's brand identity, the competitive landscape, and potential rebranding angles. Her voice trembled slightly, but she managed to keep it together. She saw the panelists nod and occasionally jot notes. Even Arthur seemed to listen attentively, though his eyes remained cold distant. When she finished, Ruth said, "Interesting points. Let's talk crisis management. Suppose a PR crisis emerges on a flight, say a passenger complaint that escalates in media coverage. How would you advise the company to respond to negative racial allegations or controversies involving staff or passengers?" Cassandra's heart nearly stopped. Was this a pointed question, referencing her behavior on the plane? Did they already know? She licked her lips and tried to stay calm. "Well, it's critical for the brand to address the issue swiftly and transparently. If a negative incident with racial undertones occurs, the company should condemn it immediately, ensure accountability, and demonstrate genuine commitment to inclusivity. A sincere public apology, if necessary, followed by tangible steps to prevent future occurrences, is vital. Words alone aren't enough. Actions speak volumes." Arthur steepled his fingers. "Would you say a single incident of racism from an individual can tarnish the brand's reputation significantly?" Cassandra cleared her throat. "Potentially, yes, especially in today's climate. Social media amplifies everything. But it also depends on how the company and its leadership handle it. If they react with sincerity and clear consequences for those involved, it can mitigate damage and even strengthen the brand's stance on diversity and inclusion." Arthur nodded slowly. He looked around the panel, then said quietly, "Thank you, Miss Wheeler. That will be all for now. We'll be in touch." The abrupt end startled her. Normally, interviews concluded with a final round of Q&A, perhaps some niceties, but she recognized this was anything but normal. She rose, shook hands with each panelist, and paused when she reached Arthur. He extended his hand, giving it a single shake before dropping it. Her heart thundered as she stepped out of the conference room. She couldn't read his expression, but the tension was palpable. As soon as the door closed behind her, she let out a shaky breath. 3 days passed. Cassandra anxiously awaited an update from Jackson Aviation Consulting. Every phone ping, every email notification made her jump. She rehearsed again and again how she might address the plane incident if it came up. She considered sending Arthur an email apology, but that might be too desperate. Finally, an email arrived from Ruth Sanchez, head of branding. It was short, crisp, and lethal in its simplicity. Dear Ms. Wheeler, thank you for meeting with our team. After careful consideration, we have decided to pursue other candidates at this time. We appreciate your interest in Jackson Aviation Consulting and wish you success in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Ruth Sanchez. Cassandra felt the world tilt under her feet, her chest constricted, tears burning her eyes. She'd known it was a long shot, but that subtle glimmer of hope she'd nurtured was now brutally extinguished. She'd lost her chance at a dream position, and it was clear why. She let the phone slip from her hands onto the couch. Her entire career trajectory had been derailed by her own careless words. She seethed with anger at herself, at Amina, at the unstoppable chain of events. A part of her wanted to blame external factors, but deep down she recognized her own prejudice had sealed her fate. The email, though polite, was a door slamming shut. To make matters worse, a few days later, a rumor circulated in the airline industry. Someone had posted an anonymous story on social media, detailing how a passenger on a corporate jet had made a racist comment about a CEO's black baby only to be shut down. The story didn't name Cassandra outright, but it named the airline and the context. People began whispering, connecting dots. Cassandra noticed her LinkedIn connections from Sky High had either gone silent or removed her. She began to fear for her reputation. Word traveled quickly in the airline community. She started receiving stony silences from once friendly colleagues. Even her boss, at her current job, called her in, concerned about unflattering rumors that might compromise the company's brand. She denied the rumors, but the suspicious glances wouldn't vanish. Meanwhile, Amina was coping with her own emotional turmoil. The incident on the plane gnawed at her. She had experienced microaggressions before, but rarely had it been so blatant, especially directed at her infant daughter. She and Arthur had long conversations about how to shield Maya from such ugliness, how to ensure she grew up confident and loved. The guilt and anger weighed on her. Arthur assured her he had handled it. He told her about the interview, how Cassandra had tried to salvage her professional future, but he didn't mention the outcome at first. Amina asked one evening, as they readied Maya for bed, "Whatever happened to that woman? Did you let her join the company?" Arthur shook his head gently, stroking Maya's cheek. "No, I let her do the interview to see how she'd handle the situation. The panel decided she wasn't the right fit. I agreed with them. We politely turned her away." Amina nodded, relief washing over her. Yet she also felt a pang. She despised what Cassandra had done, but couldn't shake the question, did she deserve total career ruin for one moment of hateful stupidity? Then she remembered the look on Cassandra's face, the words, "this loud black baby," and the sting returned. Life went on for Amina and Arthur, consumed by the daily responsibilities of running an airline and raising a child. But for Cassandra, life spiraled into a mire of anxiety. She dreaded going to work. The invitation to future networking events dried up. Her dream of a senior branding role at a big airline seemed lost forever. She kept replaying the scenario on the plane, wishing she could travel back in time and zip her lips. A few months later, Cassandra reached a breaking point. She learned that her own airline was restructuring, which meant departmental layoffs were imminent. Already tainted by unspoken rumors, Cassandra's position felt precarious. She had to do something. She decided to write a heartfelt personal letter to Arthur Jackson. Whether he'd read it or not, she didn't know. But she had to try. She typed a draft, revised it multiple times. In it, she explained that her outburst was a reflection of stress and ignorance, and not a measure of her entire moral compass. She acknowledged the racism in her statement, apologized profusely, and vowed to educate herself. She ended by saying she understood if he never forgave her, but she wanted him to know she was trying to become better. She sent the letter via email, copying Amina as well. Then she waited. Days stretched into weeks with no reply. Cassandra began to think they had deleted it outright, labeling her as a lost cause. She tried focusing on her job hunt, but the memory of that letter lingered. One evening, Cassandra's inbox pinged with a new email from an address she didn't recognize. Her pulse fluttered as she clicked it open. It read subject invitation, diversity and inclusion workshop. Dear Ms. Wheeler, Mr. Arthur Jackson has extended an invitation for you to attend a workshop on diversity and inclusion sponsored by Sky High Airlines in collaboration with the King Center here in Atlanta. It is part of an ongoing initiative to foster education and dialogue about racial equality in the aviation industry. Your attendance is entirely optional, but we hope you will consider joining us. The workshop will include panels and training sessions led by experts and is intended to promote understanding awareness and positive action. The event details are attached. Should you choose to attend, please RSVP by replying to this email. Sincerely, Sarah D. Kim, Executive Assistant to Arthur Jackson. Cassandra read it, twice stunned. Was this Arthur's way of telling her he'd read her letter? It must be. She felt a flicker of hope, coupled with a flush of shame. She hesitated for a moment. Would it be humiliating to show up, possibly face the Jacksons again? Yet something in her told her she had to go. If she was serious about changing, about growth, she needed to face the consequences head-on. She clicked reply and typed a single sentence. Thank you for the invitation. I will attend. 2 weeks later, Cassandra found herself in a conference hall at the King Center, a revered institution in Atlanta, known for advancing the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The event was well organized, featuring panel discussions on bridging racial divides in corporate spaces, personal testimonies from staff, and real-life scenarios of discriminatory behavior. Arthur Jackson was scheduled to give a keynote speech. Cassandra felt her heart pound at the thought of seeing him again. She sat at a round table with several other attendees, some from Sky High, others from different airlines or organizations. Name tags pinned to their shirts, polite smiles, but an undercurrent of seriousness hung in the air. A presenter took the stage welcoming them, explaining the day's format. We will share stories, break into small groups, and examine how bias, conscious or unconscious, impacts workplaces. Let's begin with an address from Mr. Arthur Jackson of Sky High Airlines. Arthur stepped onto the stage, commanding attention effortlessly. He thanked everyone for coming, acknowledging the sponsors and the King Center. Then, he spoke about his journey as a black man in corporate America, the barriers he faced, and the pride he felt leading a major airline. The audience listened, rapt. Cassandra leaned forward, eyes locked on Arthur. A single question hammered her mind: will he address the airplane incident? Near the end of his speech, Arthur's voice softened. Recently, my family and I experienced an incident where someone's offhand comment revealed deeper issues of racial bias. It was about my daughter. She's only a baby, unaware of the prejudice in this world. But hearing those words stung more than I can say. In that moment, I had a choice to retaliate with bitterness or to strive to create a teaching moment. I chose the latter because if we want real change, we have to give people room to learn and grow. We have to show them where they went wrong and invite them to make it right. That's what this workshop is about: acknowledging our flaws and committing to change together. Cassandra swallowed hard tears gathering in her eyes. He hadn't named her, but everyone could sense the gravity of the story. A hush fell over the crowd, and then came applause, sincere and supportive. Arthur left the stage, and the first discussion panel began. After the panel, attendees broke into smaller groups of 8 to 10 people. Cassandra found herself assigned to a circle with 2 flight attendants from Sky High, a pilot from a regional airline, and a few corporate HR representatives. They went around introducing themselves, sharing why they were there. Cassandra's turn arrived. She hesitated, then summoned courage. "I'm here because I said something offensive a few months ago, and it opened my eyes to my own biases. I realized I needed to learn and do better. I wanted to take responsibility for that." The group members nodded, expressions calm but empathetic. The flight attendants began sharing their experiences of dealing with subtle and overt racism from passengers. One described how, as a Latina woman, she sometimes faced assumptions about her background or capacity to speak English. Another, who was Black, revealed that he had once been berated by a passenger who refused to believe he was actually a flight attendant. The stories were raw, personal, each a reminder that discrimination, whether major or minor, cut deep. Cassandra listened, feeling knots in her stomach. She recognized her own story in theirs, though in a reversed role. She had inflicted that pain rather than receiving it. A sense of shame and determination brewed inside her. At the end of the session, the group leader handed out reflection cards, inviting participants to write down one concrete action they plan to take to combat bias, either in themselves or in their workplace. Cassandra wrote, "I will call out racism and prejudice, starting with my own. I will read, learn, and seek to understand perspectives outside my comfort zone. I will never again let stress be an excuse to dehumanize someone else." She placed the card in a sealed box, designated for a follow-up accountability check. She wondered if Arthur would ever see that card, or if the anonymity was designed to protect participants. Either way, she felt relieved to have put it in writing, something to hold herself to. The air in the conference hall had thinned as the crowd dispersed into mingling pockets of conversation. Cassandra stood quietly near the refreshment table, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. Her eyes kept darting around the room, tracking Arthur Jackson like a nervous shadow. She had prepared for this moment mentally for days, but now that it was here, now that she could walk up to the man whose family she had wronged, her courage nearly buckled. Finally, Arthur stood alone, his back turned slightly as he studied the spread of fruit and pastries. Cassandra inhaled deeply, then approached. Each step felt like trudging through invisible resistance. "Mr. Jackson," she said softly. He turned slowly. His face was composed, no anger, no smile, just a watchful calm. "Ms. Wheeler." The moment stretched between them like a taut wire. Cassandra's voice caught, but she forced the words out. I just wanted to say, thank you for letting me attend, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused, for what I said. Arthur nodded his gaze, not softening, but not cold either. I received your letter. That's why I extended the invitation. Cassandra's heart thumped against her ribs. He had read it. She wasn't sure if that made her feel better or more exposed. Arthur continued, I won't lie to you. It's been hard for me and my family to move on from what happened on that flight. Hearing someone reduce my baby daughter to a racial stereotype in such a callous way, it hit deeper than you could possibly know. Cassandra looked down ashamed. I understand. I can't defend what I said. I've tried to understand why I even said it. I was overwhelmed, frustrated, but that doesn't excuse anything. That moment on the plane, it showed me something ugly in myself I didn't want to see. Arthur's jaw tightened. He paused before responding, choosing his words with care. It's easy to say we're not racist. Most people believe they aren't. But the truth shows itself in moments of stress, when there's no filter, when instinct speaks. That's the moment people reveal who they really are, or at least who they have the capacity to be. Cassandra nodded slowly. I've been reflecting on that a lot. I don't want to be that person. I've been reading, listening, trying to learn. This workshop, it's made me think harder than I ever have before. Arthur studied her face. You can't erase what happened, Cassandra, but you can build from it if you're honest. Redemption doesn't come from apologies alone. It comes from consistent, uncomfortable, honest work. I know, she whispered. And I've started. I joined a diversity committee at my current company. I've spoken up in meetings where I would have stayed quiet. I've even challenged friends on things I used to let slide. It's not enough, but it's more than I was doing before. There was silence for a beat. Then Arthur said, My wife. She asked about you. Cassandra's eyes widened. She did? He nodded. She wanted to know whether I thought you meant your apology, whether you understood what it meant to harm not just her, but our child. Cassandra's throat tightened. I do. I may not have then, but now, yes. Maya didn't deserve any of that. Neither did Amina. Arthur's expression shifted slightly, something gentler, though still guarded. Amina is fiercely protective. She believes in forgiveness, but she also believes in accountability. She said that if you truly cared, you'd do more than just say sorry. You'd show it. I will, Cassandra said, immediately with no hesitation. Not just for her approval, but because it's right. Because I want Maya to grow up in a world where fewer people make the kind of mistake I made. Arthur tilted his head slightly, as though measuring her words. Then he nodded. That's a good place to start. She offered a fragile smile. Please, tell her I said thank you. And I'm sorry, from the bottom of my heart. I will, he said. Then after a long pause, he added, let's keep moving forward. We'll see where it leads. It wasn't forgiveness. Not entirely. But it was something more meaningful. It was space. A chance to grow into something better. Cassandra felt an invisible weight lift from her chest. Her lips trembled into a small, grateful smile. Arthur gave a polite nod and turned to walk away. Cassandra watched him go, her heart full of relief, regret, and a small, fragile hope. Maybe she wasn't off the hook, but maybe she was on the right path. And maybe, just maybe, that path would lead somewhere better than where she began. Weeks turned into months. Cassandra Wheeler's life didn't crash and burn, but it certainly reshaped itself in quiet, humbling ways. The interview at Jackson Aviation Consulting had been her dream ticket to the big leagues. Instead, it became a cautionary tale she couldn't outrun. Yet strangely, the humiliation wasn't what haunted her most. It was the look in Amina's eyes. That mixture of quiet dignity, maternal protectiveness, and deep human disappointment stuck with her. After several agonizing rejections and dead-end interviews, Cassandra finally landed a marketing job at a mid-sized travel tech firm based out of Raleigh. It was a step down, less pay, less visibility, but it gave her a chance to start again. And she didn't squander it. Every presentation, every pitch, every email she approached with precision, humility, and a genuine desire to listen more than speak. She signed up for unconscious bias training. She started reading books like White Fragility and So You Want to Talk About Race. She didn't always agree with everything, but she challenged herself not to hide behind defensiveness. She began attending webinars on racial equity in the workplace, and slowly she stopped trying to prove she wasn't racist and started trying to ensure she was actively anti-racist. She also joined a non-profit initiative promoting diversity in corporate leadership. It was unpaid, and some co-workers thought it odd that she'd dedicate her weekends to workshops and seminars. But for Cassandra, it wasn't about public image anymore. It was about conscience. She wanted to be better for real, not just when people were watching. Meanwhile, Arthur and Amina Jackson had put the incident behind them, or as much as one could. Maya was now a bouncing toddler, full of endless questions and gummy giggles that filled their home with life. Amina often found herself watching Maya sleep, wondering what kind of world her daughter would inherit. She held on to hope that the generation rising behind them would do better. And in her heart, she trusted that Arthur's decision to offer Cassandra a path forward wasn't weakness, it was leadership. Sky High Airlines flourished in the public eye. Arthur's decision to spearhead diversity initiatives, especially the collaboration with the King Center, earned them praise across the aviation industry. But it wasn't just a PR stunt. The workshops changed lives. Employees of all levels began speaking more openly about bias and microaggressions. The company instituted new training modules, mentorship opportunities for BIPOC employees, and formed a rotating diversity council. Arthur didn't mention Cassandra by name to anyone except Amina, but her story spread quietly among those in the know. In HR circles and executive whispers, she became the woman from the plane, a reminder of how quickly opportunity could dissolve when prejudice went unchecked. Some people thought Arthur should have blacklisted her. Others admired the restraint he'd shown. Cassandra, for her part, didn't try to run from the story. When close colleagues at her new firm asked why she left her last company, she told the truth, but framed it as a wake-up call. "I learned who I didn't want to be," she once told a junior marketer. "That moment didn't define me, but what I do afterward just might." Months later, on a rainy Wednesday, a package arrived at her new office. The receptionist handed it to her with a curious expression. "Looks fancy," she said, motioning to the embossed envelope inside. Cassandra tore it open gently. Inside was a hardcover children's book titled All Are Welcome, a story of inclusion and kindness. Nestled between the pages was a card on Sky High Airlines stationery. The handwriting was unmistakably feminine, elegant, but strong. "Ms. Wheeler, in the spirit of forward movement, here's something you might appreciate. We're all part of the same sky, after all. Amina and Maya Jackson." Cassandra sat at her desk, hands trembling as she reread the message. It wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't forgiveness in full. But it was peace. No grand gesture, no job offer. Just a small, deliberate sign that maybe, just maybe, the path she was walking had led her to a better place. She whispered to herself, "Thank you." Then, without hesitation, she placed the book on her office bookshelf cover, facing out. Every so often, a colleague would ask about it, and Cassandra would smile and say, "That book reminds me why second chances matter and how costly the first mistake can be." She never forgot that flight. She never forgot that moment. But more importantly, she never forgot to keep walking the path of growth, even when no one was watching. And so, on one seemingly ordinary flight, a shocking act of prejudice shook the cabin, but set in motion a journey toward insight, growth, and second chances. Amina and Arthur Jackson upheld their dignity, using power not just to punish, but to educate. Cassandra Wheeler paid dearly for her hateful slip, yet ultimately found a different path forward, rooted in understanding instead of fear. Sometimes the harshest lesson becomes the seed of a better tomorrow. If this story resonated with you, if it stirred emotions, sparked conversations, or opened your eyes, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every click helps us continue bringing you impactful narratives that challenge the status quo. Together, we can make sure that compassion and respect always triumph over hate, one story at a time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.